Hello then, folks. This is part three of our question and answer. Just as I'm starting to get comfortable with the format of randomly talking into a phone and not an audience, I'm starting to get a little bit comfortable with it. So same as anything, just as it starts, I start to get used to it. It's going to end now. But yeah, part three, like I said in part one, we had a lot of questions. And because I was a week or two late with putting it out, I don't want to let anybody down. So I crammed as many of the actual questions in as I could. So I hope that's okay for you and you're enjoying them really. So let's just jump straight back in and have a look at the questions. I've got some more of the complex questions in this one, or some of the non-wrestling ones as well, which I'm looking forward to answering, to be honest. So this might be a tad longer than the last two. I'm not sure. Let's hope. Let's hope we can keep it to half hour. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? I've got one off Lee Price, who's a chap who I've known for a very long time. He used to come and watch us wrestle over in Birmingham at the Collingwood Centre. So I've known you a long time, really, Lee, in that sense. So hello, mate, and hope you're okay. Great question. He said, Lee Price has asked, what do you think is the one biggest difference in wrestling from when you started until now? That's absolutely brilliant question. I had to think about it really. So when I started, obviously it was 2000. The Attitude Era was in full swing. Um, Stone Cold and The Rock and Undertaker and Mankind were on top in America and making millions and millions of dollars. And what, in my opinion, what you tend to find is that when wrestling's at a peak in America, it bleeds down to other countries because obviously Raw and SmackDown is shipped out all over the world. And when Raw and SmackDown is received well and millions of people are watching that, many more hundreds of people watch live wrestling in the halls here in the UK or wherever, because obviously they're enthused with the product. So when I started, there were very, very healthy crowds. You know, Steve had run Sutton Town Hall and Walsall Town Hall and various other places. The Collingwood Centre that I mentioned earlier, that was a couple of years later though. And the crowds were rabid and they were fantastic. And then obviously, you know, then big stars dropped off and we had a lull period, and it seems now to be on its way back up or whatnot. But I would say the biggest difference, and I've had to have a think about this, because I thought, you know, well, the locker room's different, and not really, in that, you know, it's been 20 years I've been in wrestling, and there's always been, you know, an arsehole over in the corner there, but it's always a different arsehole. There's always a grumpy person over there, and it's always someone different who's grumpy. There's always been the fun corner over there, and the guy's getting drunk over there, or whatever. So the backstage personnel has changed, but not like the tempo of it. You know, there's always somewhere, oh, I'll rather go and sit over there with them. They're a bit more like me or whatnot, you know. There's always that element to it when you're on the road and in a room full of people you don't know. But honestly, I think the biggest difference is the way in which wrestling's promoted. But when I started, I paid a lot of attention to how Steve Logan promoted K-Star Wrestling. I found it interesting. I never knew I was going to get into promoting like I am promoting now. I never knew that for a start. Maybe I should have known it because of how interested I was in the promotional skills or his methods. You know, I probably should have worked it out, but it wasn't an aspiration, if that makes sense. But I think the way that wrestling is promoted now, certainly on my level anyway, I can't talk for Vince's level because I've never been Vince, you know. But like when Steve would promote, say, Sutton Town Hall, he would have hundreds of posters everywhere, which I still do to this day because that's how I was brought in. He would put big road signs, you know, traffic lights all around the ring road and things like that. And he would contact newspapers with press releases, and we'd have to go along and pose in our Lycra, you know, Wednesday at 11:30. In the morning, you know, for a photographer while the rain's hitting our face outside the venue, like, yeah, you know. And it was very much like physical promotion, flyers, posters, these big signs that he used to get us to hang. He'd drive us around the ring road and me and Carl would jump out and put these signs on the lamppost of the ring road. You know, it was very much a visual, physical promotion. Whereas now what I see is a lot of promotions promoting on Facebook and on social media, and I see that it works for them really because, you know, not as many people go to the high street anymore. Not as many people go into the local butchers, and as they do, see a wrestling poster, oh, wrestling at Sutton Town Hall, I might pop to that, or go to the local chip shop. It's all obviously COVID's heightened this, but it was always the case anyway. More people use Uber Eats or Just Eat than have a walk to the local chip shop or whatnot, you know, and not as many people see the posters. So it's attacking Facebook with adverts or promotional offers or things like that. I would say I'll do 50-50. I still put the posters up, I still put the billboards up, because I'm still very aware that we're in the black country and not everyone has access to 24/7 internet and things like that. You know, some people have the internet for an hour and then they'll go off because they don't want to sit on it all day. You know, people are down to earth around these parts, in my opinion, anyway. But I am aware that the youth and certain people, they're just on the online all the time. I'm online a lot, so I'm not criticising them. But I'd say I'm 50-50 in that I still do the road work and the physical promotion that Steve taught me or I learned from him inadvertently, but I use social media a lot to promote the shows. Whereas there's some promotions that solely promote on social media, and nowadays they still do all right out of it. They'll still draw a crowd and whatnot. So I think the way that wrestling's promoted has changed a hell of a lot. Lee, to answer your question, you know, the internet was still dial up when I started wrestling. You know, I'd go online to maybe send an email or get in touch with my mate on MSN Messenger or whatever, and my mum would pick the phone up to speak to me nan or whatever, and I'd get cut off the internet, and it was slow as anything anyway, and there weren't any social media to speak of. About 3 or 4 years in, MySpace popped up. That was primarily for musicians to showcase the music, but I know a lot of wrestlers jumped on it, and a lot of average people jumped on it to connect. And then Facebook, Twitter, whatever, it all exploded. But I think what's different is the way that it's promoted, really. Wrestling will still always be wrestling, whether they call it sports entertainment or whatever they want to call it or term it. It'll still be, that guy versus that guy. You want to see him win and you hope that he wins. It'll always be wrestling. You still have your good versus evil, or your technical wrestler versus your brawler, or your technical wrestler versus your technical wrestler, or what have you. It'll still always be wrestling, and some of it will never change. Some of it will change for the better, much better, and some of it will never need to change. The count of three and a drop kick and an hip toss never needs to change, and then other bits do and do change over time. But for me, pragmatically thinking about it, I think the way in which wrestling is promoted has changed over the last 20 years, more so than anything else. You might have a better idea than that, but that's just the idea that popped in my head, as I read your question. So yeah, there you go. Question 2. Let's have a look. Pam Pugh has asked me, how does it make you feel when everyone cheers you when you come out to the ring, and what's going through your head? Well, a lot of wrestlers go, oh, I'm not bothered. But I'll be honest, you guys, Pam and all the local wrestling fans, you do mean an awful lot to me. So from like a personal point of view, when you all cheering, Mad Dog, and I'm coming out and you put your hands out for a high five or whatever, makes me feel good, absolutely naturally. To have your approval and to know that you guys, you like me and you come to watch me, and obviously you come to watch all the others. It ain't just me. I mean, from me personally answering that question to you, to see you guys there and the way that you react to me, it's just an honour really to have your support. It's great. But in regards to what goes through my mind, I'm all thinking about that after, because I'm on the way to the ring. I'm thinking, don't mess the drop kick up, maybe do a suplex. You've got your mind on your match and that kind of thing. But afterwards, you think, bloody hell, they really cheered for me on that entrance there, or has I got the pin, or has I got beat, or whatever. And it's just lovely. So yeah, it's an honour. It's the way I describe that, pal. Craig Thomas, how you doing, pal? You okay? Which WWE wrestler would you like to tag with, only to then turn on and have a feud? Okay, so I'm guessing you're saying that, like, in a fantasy booking scenario. I needed that. In a fantasy booking scenario, if I were to fantasy book myself, because even if you get to the WWE, you don't pick who you tag with or you feud on, and unless you're the boss's blue-eyed boy, I'm guessing. But in a fantasy scenario, if I were to tag with anybody to feud, really, I've got to think long term here. How the feud's going to blow off. Maybe a Hell in a Cell and make millions of pounds. I'm trying to think now. It's not hard really, because if you're talking fantasy, then I can time travel, can't I? So I would say, oh God, let me do it with Terry Funk or Ric Flair or Hulk Hogan. Make the big bucks for them because they're the stars. And obviously, as we've noted earlier on, I consider Ric Flair to be the GOAT, the greatest wrestler of all time. So I'd love to feud with him. But let's take it seriously and think about today's roster. Tag with, turn on, feud. It's tough, really. I don't watch enough modern wrestling to know. Oh, I tell you what, Edge has just made a comeback, ain't he? I'd like to do it with Edge. He's a great tag team wrestler. So if I had a small tag with him to turn on him, I'd learn a lot because he made his name and his bread and butter initially as a tag wrestler. And then the feud, you know, I know that some people criticise his match with Orton because there was a camera under a DDT or something like that, you know. But from what I can tell, I haven't watched the bout yet because the now crowd's kind of putting me off. But he said it was like a love letter to the style of wrestling that he liked. I saw in one of his interviews or one of his written things. And he was talking about how he'd like to have a match, and then people like Bret Hart and Harley Race text him afterwards to say, you know, that was amazing. So going off that interview, I'm so glad that popped in my head. Going off that interview and the way he speaks about wrestling and how good that I know he is from the matches I have seen him have, you know, whether it was tagging with Christian or whether it was the stuff afterwards when he came into his own and become this superstar. He obviously gets wrestling in an old school fashion and similar to the way that I like wrestling. So I'm going to go, very unusual choice. So I'd like to time travel and say Roddy Piper or something like that. But if you're talking about current wrestlers, and I know I'm cheating because he's semi-retired, but he had a match last week or the week before, I'm going to say Edge. Tag with him. He could turn on me, I'll turn on him. It don't matter. Singles run, I'll earn a load and make a load of cash. So yeah, Edge. There you go, Craig. Joe Darby has asked me a question. This is another good question. The kind of longer questions, some of these, but they're brilliant. He's put, obviously he's trained with us, just Joe, and he knows a few of the wrestlers as well. So he's got a bit of experience in this, as you can tell. He's put, I know a lot of wrestlers struggle to watch wrestling, especially a more mainstream brand. So he's talking about WWE or whatnot. So a lot of wrestlers struggle to watch modern wrestling. But if you were going to watch it, what would be your all-time favourite product and your all-time favourite match from that product? Okay. I've got to prefix this a little bit. You've probably heard the wrestlers go, I can't watch it now. I'm part in wrestling. And I've heard a lot of wrestlers say that, and I do sympathise with that. You know, like, it's like if you love Paul Daniels sawing Debbie McGee in half, and then you go to Paul Daniels' school and you learn how he actually saws her in half, even though you know fact he never saws her in half because there's no blood all over the stage. You know, because you've had 2.5 days in the Paul Daniels school of sawing people in half. He's a magician for you younger people who don't know who I'm on about. You now know how he saws her in half. So the next time you go to his show, you're not going to be as amazed when he cuts Debbie McGee in half. You're going to be, I want to know how he does that. He pulls that thing down, he pulls that lever. So I understand that. I don't get that. I still love wrestling. But I get why it would take some of the love out of it. You know, I understand that. I've heard wrestlers say that for years. Also, not so much now because people have lightened up and people have realised that they can have fun and admit that they're a fan of wrestling when they're a wrestler. But when I broke in, a lot of wrestlers, they would be criticised or chastised by the older wrestlers or maybe by the grumpier wrestlers, however you want to term it, because they weren't all old. Some of them were young. They just, you know, had a chip on the shoulder about certain things. And if you were to go in a locker room, and I'm guilty of this too, I understand this. If you were to go in a locker room and say, oh, I watched Raw last night, they go, oh, you bloody punter, you fan, get out of here, you don't belong with us, you're not one of the wrestlers. So that became a stigma for a long time. So that's why, Joe, you might have heard some of the wrestlers go, well, I don't like wrestling. And I always tell a story. There's a wrestler, I'm not going to say where he's from because there's only certain wrestlers from that area. I was almost said his hometown and it'd give it away virtually. He's a wrestler from not far away from here. And he was part of that brigade where, you know, and I was too, so I'm not knocking him too much, but he would say like, oh, I don't watch wrestling, that's for the fans, that is, I don't watch wrestling. And I always have this joke, me and Carlos from Birmingham joke about this because he'd do it all the time. He'd go, oh, I don't watch that wrestling, it's crap, that is, it's crap. Then he'd go, did you see The Undertaker on Raw last week? And it was very, very funny to us because he seemed to not want to admit that he watched wrestling, obviously. He almost wanted to criticise other people for watching wrestling, but obviously watched it and loved it. And in reality, I'm sure he's realised now because he's years ago, I don't even know if he wrestles actually. In reality, it's absolutely fine to be a fan of wrestling. It's absolutely fine to enjoy wrestling if you're a wrestler. That was the stigma from years ago, and they go, oh, you bloody punter and all. And I understand the stigma, I get it, but that's not now and it's not the time. And if you're in Black Sabbath, if you're the bass player for Black Sabbath, you've just got the job, does that mean you've got to stop watching Rainbow or listening to Deep Purple or, you know, turn Depeche Mode off? Of course it's not, you know. So it's an age-old stigma that I'm kind of glad it's gone. But that being said, Joe, you know me and you know I struggle to watch modern day wrestling, and I'll explain that one as well. The reason I don't watch modern day wrestling is because I don't like much modern day things. It's not an insult to the guy's talent. It's not me being a chip on my shoulder. Oh, I'm a wrestler, so I'm not watching wrestling. I watch wrestling all the time, and I'll answer your question properly in a minute and tell you. It's more that I'm not a modern person. I struggle with the internet. I've got to do these interviews all the way through as 30, 40-minute slots because I can't be stopping and pausing it, and I'll get it all mixed up and I'll email it wrong to somebody. I'm not very technical. I'm not very modern. If you could send me back to the 70s, I'd be well happy. Give me some vinyl records and a couple of points and 3 channels on the telly, and I'd absolutely be made up. I don't watch modern television. If I'm going to watch a film, it's either a comic book film, which is from my comic book collection over there, over a couple of thousand comics over there. But although that film's come out yesterday, it's more than likely based on some comics from the 60s and 70s, even 40s, if you're talking about Batman. I won't really watch modern day shows. I don't listen to modern day music. Most of my record collection is from the 60s and 70s, some 80s. Black Sabbath are my favourite band, then Deep Purple, and I like Whitesnake and Led Zeppelin. I like a few modern day bands, but literally probably 2 out the lot. I mean, I'm not into modern products, if that makes sense. And that's not me I just don't get into them, the 70s and the 80s, that era. That's my era, and I probably was born 30 years too early. I was born in 1984, and I should have been born somewhere, so I was about, I'd love to have been 21 in 1972. So don't think that because I don't watch wrestling, it's because I hate it, or I think that I'm a wrestler, so I'm not allowed to watch it, or I have to pretend or anything. I adore wrestling. It's just modern day wrestling, Joe, isn't to my tastes, It's just not, and that's that. I'm not insulting them. I think they're talented because I've wrestled some of them, the Johnny Gargano, for instance. I think he's amazing, and when I wrestled him, it was fantastic. But he personifies modern wrestling, and it's not 100% my thing. The promo style, how it's all written out for him, whereas Roddy Piper are just and he'd just come out of his mouth, and you could hear his asthma in the back of his voice. He'd be screaming that much, or Dusty Rhodes with sweat dripping down him, and sometimes he'd rap with the eloquence of a rapper, for want of a bit, rap like a rapper, that sounds terrible, but he'd have this rap and this drawl that would come out of him. But every now and again he'd stutter and stammer because it was real, it was out of his heart, and Terry Funk's the same. What he said he meant, and none of it was rehearsed or anything like that. It's just my tastes. But you're probably getting to the answer to your question now, because in answer to you saying what product, or what's my favourite product, or what's my favourite federation, I don't have one, but it's more 70s, 80s, early 90s wrestling that I'll watch. I don't have a favourite brand or favourite promotion. I'll go and watch some Mid-South. I'll go and watch Dr. Death, or Ted DiBiase in Mid-South, or Jim Duggan before he started the more WWF gimmick, when he was more of a, Jim Duggan, full stop, though. I'd watch him anytime, even against Steve Austin in the 90s. He's one of my favourite bouts, But I like the older stuff. I'll watch Ric Flair and Barry Windham. I'll watch, but then I'll switch and I'll watch Japanese wrestling. But again, I'll watch Japanese wrestling from the 80s and the 90s. I don't watch the Japanese wrestling now. I couldn't tell you 5 of the stars. It's just not my thing. I don't mean that nasty. I'll watch Kenta Kobashi against Dr. Death, or I'll watch Misawa, or I'll watch Jumbo. I'll watch those stars from that era because I just happen to enjoy that era more. And it's not down to a style, because I'll watch Mexican wrestling, but I won't watch anything from now. I'll watch El Dandy, or I'll watch La Parka. I'll watch Japanese wrestling, like I say, but Misawa, Kobashi, Stan Hansen. I'll watch English wrestling, but it's nothing from today. Although, again, I know they're great. It's just not my taste. English wrestling, I'll watch Johnny Saint, Rollerball Rocco. I watch my Steve Logo matches a lot because he taught me. So if I see a new match on YouTube that I haven't seen of his, I'm like, Steve Logan against Fit Finlay, brilliant. I'll watch that. Or I'll watch American wrestling. And it's any of the territories. I watch things like right back from the 60s in black and white. Like you've heard me say at training, Lou Thez against Vern Gagne is one of my favourite ever matches. It's so realistic and so gritty, and it's such, you can see that match is a sporting contest. I love that. Or I'll watch Flair, the Andersons, Tully Blanchard, Funk, Piper. the Wyndhams, the Rhodes, you know, as in like Dusty, but then Dustin as he come in as the natural, he was fantastic. You know, even right down to like Pillman and Brian, you know, the Z-Man and things like that, Brian Pillman and Tom Zenk and things like that. I love the older wrestling. I don't have a particular brand, and to pin me down to a particular match would be tough as well. If I had to say one now, and it's only because I watched it a month ago, but in a month I'll have a new favourite, Joe. But at the moment, it's a certain Midnight Express versus the Rock and Roll Express match, and I've probably watched that 5 times since lockdown because I keep watching it for different tips. There's certain bits in it that the Rock and Rolls are doing. I'm like, well, I can sell like that, and I can nick that. And while people are nicking off what's on NXT, it's not as special because they'll nick something there, but the fans will see him do it and they go, oh yeah, that superstar did that last week. And instead of thinking about you, they'll think about that superstar last week because he's got the bigger stage. He's more famous. He's probably got a little bit more tan on him. He's probably got a little bit more baby oil on him. And what I mean by that is the production, you know, the lights, the smokes, the this, that and the other. And they'll stop thinking about you then. But you've just done that kid's best move. You've probably even done it better than him. But they'll think of him because they've got Jim Ross, or, well, it's Jim Ross now. Is it Michael Cole commentating over it, or somebody else? And all of a sudden, they're not thinking of you. But if I can pull something out of the 70s and the 80s, not only am I enjoying that style more, because let's face it, if I'm watching wrestling, I'm watching it because I enjoy it. So I enjoy, you know, that's better for me. But not only that, if I do nick anything or I'm influenced by anything, if I nick it on purpose, or sometimes you'll see something, a mannerism or a bit of psychology or a bit of movement, and you'll steal it by accident because you saw it last week on whatever you were watching. Well, if I nick from the 70s and 80s, not many people are realising where I've got it from, so their attention's on me again, you know, rather than, oh, Matt did that drop kick a little bit like Bob Holly. I'll think about Bob Holly for the next 3 minutes and stop watching the match. You know, I find that's beneficial. But when it comes to personal taste, it's just the older wrestling. Yeah, I'll even watch stuff from like 96. You know, mind you, that's 25 years ago now, 24 years ago in it now. But to me, that's yesterday. 96 is modern. Most modern I'll get up to is like 98, 99, and I'll like certain aspects of the Attitude Era, or I like the WCW Cruiserweight division or some of the stuff from WCW. But that to me is super new. You know, if I'm watching a WCW pay-per-view from 1998 and the NWO on it, that's super new to me. That gives you an idea of how old my tastes are. I've rambled off enough about that now, Joe. I think you've got my answer. So let's have a look at the next one. Okay, what's your proudest wrestling moment to date? I've probably got to go with my first tour of Japan. Obviously, I've had 2 tours of Japan so far. I had a third one scheduled, but the COVID lockdown cancelled it. But with Japan, I watched those tapes when I was younger. I was into my tape trading, which exposed me to a lot of the older wrestling that I've just addressed in the last question. And first Japanese match I ever saw was Kenta Kobashi and Dr. Death again, which I've referenced. Kobashi's there in these orange trunks and he's a mountain of a man, and the Doc's just, I love Dr. Death. Steve Williams, one of my favourites. He's just a mountain, ain't he? You know, so stocky and built. And basically, they beat the piss out of each other for 40 minutes. And on the back of that, I've researched more about Japanese wrestling. I would watch White Kid and Tiger Mask and all these other people. And just fell in love with that style of wrestling. But never thought that I could get there because it's very hard to get out to Japan. You've got to be the best of the best of the best. And by the time that I got out there, before I was offered the tour, I'd already given up on the possibility of it happening, if you know what I mean. I thought, well, you know, I'm in my 30s now. It's not going to happen. I've been lucky enough to wrestle all over Europe. I've been lucky enough to have 2 tours of America. I felt, you know, if I had to retire at 33 or something, you know, I would have been gutted because I'd like to wrestle well into my 60s like Scrubber or Blondie Barrett. But the truth is I thought that opportunity had passed me by. But if I had to retire at 32, 33, I'd kind of accepted, you know, well, I've done a lot. You know, I was happy. Obviously, I've got much more aspirations, but I would have been able to reconcile it. But then when Japan was offered to me, I was just in awe of the situation, and I'm so proud I've done it. You know, I've been on the little minibus and done the upright minibus, doing the 9-hour rides to the next town. I've done the Ribera Steakhouse. I've got my jacket. I've wrestled Japanese people in front of Japanese crowds. I've got standing ovations. I've had the streamers thrown at me, which is one of the biggest honours you can probably ever have. To stand in Kawasaki City and have my name announced, and I'd had a few matches and they'd got to see me, and then they chuck all these red, white and blue streamers at you, which they buy on the way in. That was an honour, because they don't just do that to anybody. They throw the streamers out if they like you, you know. And even to have one streamer come down, he's like, wow, well, that one person's gone out of the way to buy a Mad Dog streamer and throw it in, it's an honour. And then they're all raining in at me, and all the red, white and blue, and I'm dressed in red, white and blue, and it was just, yeah, not just that moment though, but the whole first tour, because it's always the first time's the most special. Obviously, the second time I adored, I'm not devaluing it, but my proudest moment. Yeah, you said moment and not match. I was just checking just that you didn't say match. I would have completely wasted the last 10 minutes if that's the case. Yeah, first tour in Japan. There's your answer, mate. Let's have a look. Next question. Okay, Hayley Farron has asked me, hello Hayley, you all right, mate? Great family, great lady. What's been your best venue and show? So I'm presuming you're asking me as a promoter now, really. My best venue is, without a shadow of a doubt, Darlaston Town Hall. That's my best venue. I love it. The acoustics are perfect. The balcony, the organ at the back of the room. I love Darlaston Town Hall. That's the best venue. Even though I've got bigger venues, or I've got access to bigger venues and stuff like that, my favourite venue, and therefore my best, because, you know, it's a personal question you're asking me, is Darlaston Town Hall. I love it. That being said, my favourite show that I've run, and it's only because we ploughed so much energy and time into it, and it was our super show, was the show we did at Willenhall Baths. I've probably referenced a couple of times so far, I'm a big WCW fan. And the first ever main event of WCW Thunder, which was a great show, I used to watch it because they had a lot of the cruiserweights on, a lot of the lesser known wrestlers on, which I enjoyed more. The first ever main event of that was the Juice, Juventud Guerrera, against Ultimo Dragon. Two of my heroes who actually became friends, tag partners on multiple occasions, and drinking buddies as well, which I'm very, very proud and honoured to say. They were our main event at Willenhall Baths. Not only that, we had the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase on the show too. So we had three huge names on that show. We also had like international people. I believe that Red Eagle was on that show, and I believe that, you know, there was some more international stars on there, and a lot of my friends were on it because I booked people. You know, it was my big hurrah and my big thing, and I got people around me. It was a great show. But to have the $1 Million Man on it, a Hall of Famer who was absolutely wonderful. He was a wonderful man, and he had a lot of time for me and my wife, and a lot of time for anybody who happened to talk to him. He weren't grumpy in any way. I mean, him watching the old school enter was brilliant. He just chuckled. He enjoyed himself as well. And having him on, but then having that main event of Ultimo Dragon and the Juice in front of one of the biggest crowds we've ever had, top to bottom, the show was amazing. I can tell you what the opener did. I can tell you what my match did. I watched so much of it because we had a big glass window to watch it through as well. But yeah, so Darlaston Town Hall, but also the Willenhall Baths show, the actual show. So it's separate, really. My favourite or best venue is Darlaston Town Hall. They're a shadow of a doubt. I love it there. But the best show, or at least my favourite show, you could watch it and say, well, that's not your best show, because, you know, that show from 6 months ago was your best show. It's up to you, really, what you watch. But I adored that show. You know, I just loved how it went. I loved how it flowed, and I was able to go on third, finish my match, get changed, go to the balcony and watch my show be main evented by Japanese star Ultimo Dragon against Mexican star the Juice, Juventud Guerrera. Both of them there, my friends, both of them there working their butts off. And it was like a main event from WCW history here in the Black Country, in Willenhall, in front of you folks. And I could not have been more proud at that stage. I was like, wow, you know. So that was the best show. We drew a massive crowd. It was a super show, you know, and it was just quality top to bottom. I'm still in awe of that show, really. So yeah, there you go. Long-winded answer, but it is the answer. All right, Hayley.